everyone, and thank you for joining us here today for this webinar on the history of MassRecycle. I am pleased to see such a terrific turnout, as there has rarely ever been such a great combination of speakers and powerful, passionate leaders on a Massachusetts stage, virtual or otherwise. But please let me start at the beginning. My name is Gretchen Carey, and I'm the current president of MassRecycle. I'm also the Recycling and Organics Coordinator of New England for Republic Services. It is my honor today to introduce our recent addition to the Board of Directors and moderator for this event, Rob Gogan. Rob has just recently retired from 30 years as the manager of Harvard University's Recycling and Waste Services, and we are extremely grateful to have his enthusiasm and experience added to our board. He has jumped in with both feet and wasted no time in volunteering to put together this webinar. So thank you, Rob, for coordinating our speakers today, and I will pass the microphone to you.
Thank you, Gretchen.
You got to know where to find.
I'm going to unspool a little bit of banjo picking and singing from our first all-star, Pat Scanlon, the founding president of MassRecycle. And if you haven't tuned into his wonderful recordings, you can check them out now on Spotify. And I encourage you to listen, but I'm going to have to turn this down now and introduce Pat, the founding president of MassRecycle in 1989. Following his military service in Vietnam, Pat went to work for the Newark Group, North Shore Fibers, one of the largest paper recyclers in the Northeast. Serving on the National Recycling Coalition, Pat made it possible for the NRC convention to come to Boston in 1992. And David Loveland, the president of the NRC at the time, said that MassRecycle was the fastest growing state recycling organization in the nation. And he asked Pat to write kind of how he did it. So Pat did manage to find the article he wrote, which was sent to all the SROs across the country. Come and see how Massachusetts did it. Pat established and developed the Mercury Recovery Program for Wheelabrator Technologies, Inc., a program which has recovered over 10,000 pounds of mercury from release into the environment. So without further ado, here's our first all-star, Pat Scanlon.
There was no staff. We did everything. We volunteered to do everything ourselves in all the committees, and everybody just really worked real hard. The amount of talent that we had was just incredible. So, but to go back to the very beginning, as Rob said, I worked for the Newark Group, which is the North Shore Recycle Fibers, and I was on the board of the NRC, and then I was hired as director of recycling at Wheelabrator, and so I went to Wheelabrator. I had wanted, being on the board of the NRC, I had wanted to get a state association started here in Massachusetts. And it was Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Connecticut. They had state associations. Massachusetts and Rhode Island were the only two states that didn't, which here we are in the middle of New England, and it just blew my mind that we didn't have a state association. And the Mass Audubon Society had, we're going to, through Debbie Carey at the Mass Audubon Society, was going to have a half-day conference on recycling. And it was called Garbage to Gold, is what it was. And Ben was a speaker, and I was invited to be a speaker at that. And then I realized that it was at Holy Cross. I realized that it was only a half-day conference. And so I contacted Debbie and I said, you know, Deb, I would like to extend the program and use the afternoon and try to get a state association started here in Massachusetts. And she thought that was a great idea. And so she put it out that we were going to have that session in the afternoon. And I contacted the paper dealers and the trash guys, the state DEP. There was 2 regional recycling organizations. And I put together a mailing list of over 700 names and sent out a personal invitation to those 700 saying, come to the conference, but come to the afternoon to start the State Recycling Association. We're going to, you know, and we had, I think there was like 150 people at that conference, Ben, if you remember. Anyway, it's a long time ago. And I said to Bill Stanwood at the time, you know, if there's 3 people at the conference, at the session that want to get a state associations going, we're going to get a state association going, no matter how much. So that afternoon session, there was like 70 people came. It was incredible. You know, the room was packed, standing room only in the back. I had Dale Goebbels, who's the president of the NRC, BJ Jones from Maine. Gary Olson couldn't make it. I had one other person, I'm sorry, I forget who that, it might've been from Vermont, I forget. And so we went through everything about the NRC, everything about the organization, you know, and talking about the state associations. And at the end of that, and I had already kind of coined the name MassRecycle. Makes sense. Massachusetts recycling is MassRecycle. I mean, it's the most logical name ever. And so at the end of that meeting, I stood up, I was moderating, and I said, you know, we are going to be starting a state association. Who would like to participate in the formation of this organization? Every hand in the room went up. It was phenomenal, the amount of energy that was in the room. And these are the who of recycling or solid waste in the state. It was fantastic. So then we, I forget who it was, but someone from that area got a church, and right off of Route 9 and 290. And so we met in May, June, and July, and we had 45 to 50 people at each of those meetings. And Ben, you were there, right? At each one of those meetings, and we broke out into groups of like 12 to 15, working on different aspects of all kinds of things. It was amazing, the energy and how we pulled it all together. And it was Patty Daly from down on the Cape, and then I got a friend of mine who worked at the big law firm, Phil Boxall, to work on the bylaws. So I got bylaws from several states plus the NRC. So we used that as a template as to how we put the bylaws together. And then, and so in the middle of the summer, July, we had, I think that's the meeting that we nailed it all down. We sent in for our nonprofit status, and you know, everybody voted on the name MassRecycle, and we're off and running. Marie Valenti was, and others on the communication. She was just so, we had so much talent. We came out with a newsletter right away of the formation. I think I have a copy here of this new state association. And one of the things we thought was, what we had to do was get out there. Ben's place was always the home base, you know, but to get out. And so we had meetings in the West. We had, you know, meetings at different locations down on the Cape. So we invite all those regional people that come. We did a paper forum, and I think it was, I have the paper here. First thing we did was a paper forum. And my God, we had like 150 people come to the paper forum. Then we did one on plastics. And I don't know, Adam, were you part of the paper one? You might have been, yes. And then the plastic, I know Ben was. And then we had in May of 1990, this is only 1 year later, we did a conference at Tufts University. And again, we had a few hundred people come to the conference. And then we were doing, I remember we did something on the Boston Common, different places, but every place we went, we had sign-up sheets. And so we gathered all these names of, you know, people that we could contact with. And then, so that was in 90, we did that conference in May. And I had, not I, but the team who was on the conference committee put together a package for, and then it was with the Massachusetts, the Business Association, what is it, Chamber of Commerce, put together a whole slick package for us to come to Boston for all the amenities in Boston, and we put together the package for the NRC to host the convention, and which we called the Congress National, and I made that presentation at the board meeting, and with the slick slideshow and the whole thing. But we were able to raise like over $60,000 for that, I forget the total amount, but it came in pretty hefty. And we got the Heinz Convention Center, we got the rooms and whatever, and then we did the and did that. But the whole time we were all working. There was a buzz in Massachusetts amongst the like-minded people of this new organization, and we just felt that we need to come out fast. We need to come out strong. It needed to be inclusive. It needed to be inclusive of all the different, the 5 different groups that we were looking at, which were citizens and nonprofits, government and business, and was there a 5th one? Whatever the 5th one. And so the first memberships on the board were split into those categories, and so it was equal representation. No one category could overwhelm the others. Whatever. So it was really good in that way. And then we did the Congress, and I hope I'm not going through too fast to this. If it's going okay, let me know.
That's great. That's great. You're going to show your T-shirt. You're going to show your T-shirt.
Well, I want to tell this story about the Congress because it was really so exciting, for us to do it at the Heinz. I mean, it was a big deal, and we had like 60 people on the steering committee, all doing the different things. One of the things that we had was the tours, and we had the best tour package of any Congress I'd ever been to. It was so comprehensive with what we have here in Massachusetts, with the processing centers and the mills and all kinds of things. It was fascinating, and everyone, the outreach for this was fantastic, but we wanted to make a bang, and so here we are in Boston, and I know the trains come from the south, and I know they come from the west, right? And so I got this brainy idea, and I contacted Amtrak, and I even went down to DC to meet with Amtrak to figure it out. And so there was a train, we designated a particular train, coming from Florida that would go to DC, that would change trains and then come to Boston. And there's the other one from California, would come to Chicago, change trains and come to Boston. Both trains got the South Station 15 minutes apart. I mean, that's how we coordinated it. And we told everyone to get on the second car of these trains, right? And I went down to New Haven and got on the train in New Haven to come up with it. And the car was packed. It was so much. So everybody had these T-shirts. I'm going to show you the T-shirt. And 3-corner hats. So you imagine people on the train with these T-shirts and the 3-corner hats. And so here's the T-shirt. You can see it, right? The recycler, and so the recycling special, and on the back it's got the thing about the conference and the whole thing on the back of the conference. So people were wearing these T-shirts with the 3-corner hats, and the people on the program committee. So picture this: we get off the train and we walk into the main area of South Station. Everybody's been to South Station. And we had a stage set up in South Station. And when we got there, the lieutenant governor was talking, and then we had a bluegrass band playing, and the other people came in, 15 minutes later, and we had this rally in the South Station, all people trying to catch the trains, wondering what's going on. And then we had the conference. And that, I think, was such a milestone for MassRecycle because it really put us on the map, not just locally, but nationally, because everyone nationally then knew that MassRecycle was an organization to be, to be recognized, because we did such a great conference, and it wasn't for a couple years before we hired Dorothy Supert, which was I forget, we were like probably 3 years into the, maybe more, into the organization before we got a staff person. And you remember Dorothy? Everybody remember Dorothy? And she was wonderful, and took a lot of pressure off a lot of people because everybody was doing all the work. And then we said, here, Dorothy, it's all yours now. No, but she was great, and that really helped. At one point, we had over 800 members of MassRecycle. So I do want to talk about a little. I got a couple of minutes, Rob. In terms of what we anticipated and what was normal in other state associations, was you had 3 different prongs of to get revenues, to raise money. 1 was your membership, 2 was your conference, and 3 was the business associations, right? Well, after we did the conference, the Congress, we had put so much energy into the organization, into the conference, that that we kind of lost the energy afterwards, to move on. And that's when Dan Moon, not to miss an opportunity, he stepped in and he started a conference based on what we did. And he was even calling it the Massachusetts Congress. And I called him, I said, Dan, you can't use that name. You can't say it's a Congress, that's for the National Recycling. But we didn't have the energy as an organization to follow through with the next year to have our own conference. Dan stepped in and ran his own conference. So we lost that as an opportunity to raise money. Then the Mass DEP, saw this, I guess, this opportunity and helped form Waste Cap. So they thought that, Waste Cap would handle the business part of it, and then Dan had that. So what we were left with was to raise money, was the allies in the business community, such as Ben and others, but from our membership. So we lost a lot of opportunity to raise the money. And so we really existed. And that's when we started the special program for recognition of businesses and whatever to raise money, which has been fairly successful over the years. So, I guess one other thing about the Congress was we had to get people, organizers throughout the country to get on. So I went down and met with the Steel Recycling Institute, a guy by the name of Bill Heaton, who has passed away. So I met with Bill, and he was a great guy, still in Pittsburgh. And I told him all about the conference, and I wanted his people to be coordinators along the way, to get people on the train and do all that. And he was all for it, and it was great. And he had some of his coordinators in the office, and he stood up and he said, "This is great, Pat. We're glad to participate." And then he got him. I said, "Bill, one other thing, if you could sit down." So Bill sat down. He said, "What's that?" I said, "Well, we've got everything organized except for one thing." And he said, "What's that?" I said, "The welcoming reception." And he said, "Oh." He said, "What does that entail?" I said, "Well, we've got it all lined up at the aquarium, and that would be the reception when everybody would come in, and so we need a sponsor to sponsor that reception." And he said, "How much is that going to cost?" I said, "Well, I've got it down to $40,000. And Bill sat there for a minute, sat back and went, "We'll do it." I almost fell out of my chair. I said, "Holy shit, are you kidding me?" So, and Bill and I became best of friends. And at the end of that thing, he was drunk as a skunk. And he came over and he gave me a big hug. And Bill, you knew Bill, Ben, well, you know what I'm talking about then. So, and he gave me a big hug. He said, "Man, this was so much fun." And so he did that for the next 4 Congresses, right? And yeah, and down in the one in Florida at Disney, right? We rented Disney. That must have cost him a fortune. But after that one, he came up drunk as a skunk at the end. But he pointed. I still remember him, and he pointed at me. He goes, "Scanlon, you've cost me a lot of effing money." And I said, "Bill, and we loved every penny of it." So that's the beginning of MassRecycle. But it was really, all the people who participated. I can't name them all, but my God, I love them all. Everybody to a person was so committed to making this organization a reality, and they were so talented. Everybody came to the table with different skills and enthusiasm, and that's what made, so here we are 32 years later, and MassRecycle is you're still there. We're still here. I mean, it's just, my hat's off to you for continuing what was started so long ago. It was and all the hard work, and people who did the legislative stuff. I know Claire was involved in that kind of stuff, and Amy Perry was involved, and Amy Perlmutter and others were involved in that, and that was all important. I was all about organizing. I was all about building the organization, and in support of all those everything else that was going on. But it was more I guess being the cheerleader of recycling for MassRecycle, and that was I guess I looked at that as my role, and to help get it going and sustaining. And the reason that I dropped off, I should add, that after 10 years, my employment situation was changing, and both of my parents were dying at the same time, and it just became too much to handle everything, and that's why I dropped off of MassRecycle and WasteCap and whatever. But you've always been a dear part of my heart, and watching you sustain and control and grow. So you've all done a great job. And
well, Pat, we owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to you for beginning the organization so well, and. On behalf of a round of applause, Jan suggests, and I still have my steel cup from the Steel Recycling Institute, and with the ball chain that you put around your neck, and you would belly up to the bar with your steel mug. I didn't realize I had you to thank for the generosity of the Steel Recycling Institute.
And do you have the lunchbox? Do you have the lunchbox?
No, that one I didn't.
Lunchbox was, anyway.
Tremendous. Thank you so much, Pat. And you heard the name of Ben Harvey mentioned several times by Pat. He was there at the beginning too. And just like Pat said, his conference room was the home away from home for the board of directors of MassRecycle for many years. Westboro, centrally located. I just want to introduce you all, if you, on the rare, to the rare person who hasn't heard of Ben. Ben is a well-respected and nationally recognized business leader and an authority in his industry. He's used his years of experience and wealth of knowledge in the industry to educate thousands of businesses and association leaders through presentations at local, regional, and national forums on numerous occasions, including to my hometown Acton League of Women Voters last week. Thank you, Ben. He continues to be a sought-after speaker on many business-related topics. He's also well-respected by the regulatory agencies that continue to seek his unbiased opinion. Ben has also been interviewed for industry-related articles for many trade magazines, including Waste Age, Scrap, Recycling Today, and C&D World. So Ben, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Rob. And as I was listening to Pat, I said, I'm going to concede my time to him. He was telling such a wonderful story about the early days and bringing up all the names that it takes like 3 people to remember all of the names of the people that we were involved in through all that time. And if there's any reason why we have a MassRecycle today, it's certainly the enthusiasm. I mean, here's Pat 32 years later, has more enthusiasm. I want to get back involved. I want to join up again. Let's go. Let's get the Congress going. Let's get these meetings going. Pat, you just have an enthusiasm to this day that just is unbelievable. So thank you for that. And yeah, thank you for putting this together. And I was one of those early ones. I think, I don't know whether it's a record that anybody else wants to achieve, but I think I was the longest tenured member of the board of directors. Finally, they figured a way to get me off. They kept changing the rules, you know, to make it, you know, okay, now you got to attend 1 meeting, you can't miss more than 1 meeting a year. Then it was 2 meetings a year. And finally they made it, if you miss, you know, so many meetings, you're out. So somehow I got booted out. I'm kidding. I think my time has come. There's so much new enthusiasm. There's so many new, wonderful people that have stepped up to fill the shoes of Pat and myself and Claire that started this work many years ago. So I thank you to all of MassRecycle people that are still there today. And yeah, I remember back that Holy Cross meeting and going into that room where we didn't know who was going to show up. And as Pat said, there's 70, 80 people there. We came out, we met in the Congregational Church up in Worcester, 45, 50 people sitting around in a great big circle, and everybody's got a different agenda and everybody has a different idea. And I think it's important to remember that back then, even though this was what, how many years after the first Earth Day, 18 years or whatever it is, recycling was kind of still an infant. I mean, you know, we were doing a lot of paper recycling and we were collecting from large generators. We would do paper drives, but there was nothing to bring it down to the individual municipal level. And I think that was one of the great things that MassRecycle did. I know as I was trying to prepare myself, what did MassRecycle do? MassRecycle brought together all of these different people with different agendas, different ideas, to come up with a plan to get recycling formulated and started in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And it was difficult in those early days. It was real tough to get the momentum going. It was tough to find a consensus because we had so many different opinions on how to get there. But look at where we've come today. I mean, we've got municipal collection in all of our town, most of our towns. Back then, if a municipality was doing recycling, it was a drop-off program. You mentioned Maria Valenti. Well, Maria lived in my hometown of Westboro, and I got involved with Maria because we started a glass recycling in barrels back then. I think Murray Fox had just opened up his glass recycling facility out in Oxford or wherever it was. And Maria said, you got to get involved more in this stuff. And she was a driving catalyst for me and our company to get more involved in recycling at MassRecycle. So I'm trying to think through, I mean, Pat, you did a great job of summarizing it. We did. We had some great meetings. We had some great opportunities to dictate or guide, I wouldn't say guide recycling in Massachusetts. Dorothy Suppet was a name, and I ran into her many years after she left. Funny thing, up in a restaurant in Vermont, and just one of those rare things that, oh my gosh, there's somebody that helped us get started. And we go back and you know, what is some of the proudest things? I think the proudest thing for me as a board member and for us that initiated this is what Pat said, that this organization is still going. We had some tough times. We really had some tough times. Had a lot of momentum in the beginning. We had that cash infusion to do all of those things that Pat was talking about. But then there was a period of time, maybe 20 years in, where the interest was kind of lagging. We were struggling financially. We really, and I think that's when we kind of, one of the reasons we might have got away from the NRC, we were struggling ourselves financially at the time. And I remember Janet Amin and myself and a bunch of the other board members at that time, what do we want to do? Do we want to keep MassRecycle alive? Is there a future in MassRecycle? And we got through that very difficult time. I think a lot of us have put so much work and effort into MassRecycle that we didn't just want it to go away. And now, Rob, you're there now, and we've got some new, fresh blood. Even though you're retired, you're new at this job, and it's just a wonderful thing to see. I'm just looking down here at some of the things. We talk about the ability to help and advise in recycling. I think MassRecycle was a very good advisor to Mass DEP. I think we came up with ideas and we tried to push them up to Mass DEP. Mass DEP was a partner of the MassRecycle in some way, shape, or form. We always had somebody that sat on the board from MassRecycle so that they knew our thinking. And I think that we were able to help guide recycling in the state, having that closeness to Mass DEP. You know, there's so many. Again, I think that the best of the Recycle Smart that we just came up with and the impact that has had. Rob, that was one of the things that you kind of wanted us to talk about as one of the haulers that had input into the Recycle Smart and working with Mass DEP and the other haulers and the processes in the Commonwealth. It was something that now it should be, no matter what municipality you live in, everything should be the same. Not that one company can handle this and another company can handle that. And Mass DEP says we should be doing this. It's a consensus. And I think that, again, a strong point of MassRecycle to work behind the scenes to make those things happen. So again, I'm very excited where the organization is today. I could probably go on and talk for an hour. I see all these little things popping up on the bottom. Robin, thank you for the memories. I'm telling you, Robin should be doing this. He's got the more memory than I have about the early days of this. So Robin, I appreciate you popping those little things up. Everybody, Jana Means popped up a couple down there. But you know, I wish MassRecycle the greatest success in the future. Keep working hard, guys. There's still a lot to be accomplished. We've accomplished a lot in our 32 years to grow recycling in the Commonwealth, and I think nationwide. Pat mentioned our little seed that developed throughout the country, and I think that, you know, what we started here in Massachusetts and in the Northeast was pushed, and what happened also in California kind of pushed into some of the other regions of our country. And I think that that's helped the recycling business and the recycling community and all of that. So that's great. That's great. So I'm gonna concede my time now so that we have some time for questions later on. And Pat, thank you for a job well done.
Great, and thank you, Ben. That was awesome. We so appreciate, round of applause. We so appreciate your support, and especially from someone in the waste industry who has done so much to keep recycling on the forefront of Massachusetts materials management policies. And thanks also to Robin, bringing up the names you do. And I'm sorry to say Alan Silverstein is not with us anymore. One of our early treasurers, a longtime founder and longtime director of the CET in Pittsfield. Many names that I'm sure we could come up with who aren't with us anymore, but they're missed but not forgotten. So we're going to pass the torch now into the capable hands of Claire Sullivan-Galkowski, who has been the executive director of the 17-town South Shore Recycling Cooperative since 1998. Prior to that, she ran a microbiology teaching lab at MIT. A lifelong waste hauler, I'm sorry, waste hater. I'm gonna get new glasses here. Waste hater. Parenthood sparked her concern about unsustainable waste practices. Her volunteer work led her to a position as Boston's recycling block captain, coordinator, followed by her hiring by the SSRC. She served on the board of MassRecycle for 10 years and as president from 2005 to 2007. Right after that, she became the secretary for a long time. Claire now serves on the Mass Product Stewardship Council and the Westwood Environmental Action Committee. So Claire, thank you again so much for being here today.
Thank you, Rob. It was an honor to be invited since there are so many other worthy people that we have been mentioned, you know, Robin and Jan and Jess, the list goes on, you know, several of them are on. Kathy, Phil, Ellie, I jotted down names, Susan, Justine, Gunther, Judy, Janet, Vicky, Todd and Julia, Janice Perret, Carrie, Mike, Rachel, and Will, some of our newer people in the community. There, I got through that pretty fast. It's great to see all of you guys here. And, you know, this organization, as you can tell, was built on many people's hard work and enthusiasm. And I wasn't yet in my environmental stage of life when this organization was formed. But I did get involved in the early 90s. I think I discovered MassRecycle at a BioRecycled pavilion back in the early 90s, where I remember meeting Joe Lambert, and subscribed to the Mass Recycler, which you can see behind me. If you want, I will have a few other virtual backgrounds since I didn't get my slides in in time, being the last minute maid. So if you want to see the backgrounds, you can go to the top right of your screen to where it says view, and you can click it on speaker view. But if you want to see the Hollywood squares, that's fine too. So as Bren was talking about, I joined the board in 2001, right as they were on the brink of insolvency and debating whether they would remain an entity or not. The bank balance, I looked up some old notes. I have tons of old files, by the way, if anybody's looking for them. I have a huge cache of these things. Our bank balance was $1,598 in July of 2001, with 12,000 in accounts payable, much of that to the NRC, as has been mentioned. We had lost our staff. We had an interim executive director. I don't even know if she was being paid, but I remember, you know, one of the first few meetings I was at, they were moving out of the Temple Street office, and Jan was picking up the mail at a post office box, and the board really had to go back to the roots and be the drivers of this organization for a couple of years, I believe, until we were able to get somebody in. No, it was actually a few years, because we had I should have looked this up. I don't remember if we had any staff when I became president in 05. I know we hired Jess at some point in there, and that was a godsend, having Jess taking care of things. And I elevated her to executive director for a while, and she was indispensable. I don't know how the board managed without her. By the following year, we had our bank balance up. We put our shoulders to the steel, or whatever the expression is. We had 20,000 in our accounts. Our accounts payable was down to 6,500, and it just shows what a resilient organization this is. And I think Jan Amin really needs a lot of the credit for pulling us out of that quagmire, along with the rest of the board. We had Jess, Jen Hyde, I think, was on there. I didn't write down. There were a lot of blasts from the past, and some of you are still with us. Ben Harvey was involved with that. Steve, Joanne Becerra, and Steve, now his name, her husband. I remember coming in and going, oh my God, did I just join a sinking ship? But we were not sinking. So By 2002, we started running recycling coordinator trainings because the industry, and municipal governments were having a more formal role in providing recycling services by then, as opposed to when I first got involved, when, as Ben mentioned, we were running monthly drop-offs. I lived in Boston, and we were running monthly volunteer-run, source-separated drop-off events once a month. And I was involved with that too, with recycling in Roslindale. So we have come a long way, by the time right when I moved out of the city of Boston got curbside recycling in 1994. And that was just with the bins and, you have the dual stream. But I wasn't able to take advantage of that because I moved out of the city right at that moment. But by 2002, we were running trainings. We did a single stream recycling workshop. That was before it was a thing, for better or for worse. We were a conference partner with the NRRA, and subsequently we partnered with DEP and SWANA on the annual conference, which we have now, I think MassRecycle does that on its own now, right? Yes. So those were some things that ramped up over the course of a few short years with a lot of hard work. We ran annual municipal recyclers workshops. I remember the first one was at E.L. Harvey in the afternoon. And, there were like 30 or 40 people there, and it really grew. Just put together a manual that was able to be changed each year because it was in a 3-ring binder. So that just shows how the industry, changes. You can't have one manual that's going to last very long. So rather than changing out and having new manuals every year, we just would change pages out, which, was a good savings in paper. We were walking the walk here. Oh yes, and Jan reminds us that DEP did help us out of the hole as well. That was probably a major source of our initial funding and ongoing as well. So then things got kind of fun as we got into the middle of the aughts. With more conferences, we were running tours. We partnered with the Mass State Lottery for a thing called the Instant Replay, which ended up being a victim of its own success. Actually, I have a picture of that. Let me find it. Choose a virtual background. So we worked with them. There it is. This was at the Boston Common at the Earth Fest, and the line of people were coming with trunks full of old lottery tickets, and there was a line literally a mile long. They had to bring in new trucks. E.L. Harvey was the one who was collecting and shredding the tickets to be recycled into toilet paper, I believe, or tissue paper. And ultimately, that was a great program, but it was a victim of its own success because we were getting trunks full of lottery tickets. You trade in 25 lottery tickets would get you 1 instant ticket that you could scratch off, and it was a really exciting and fun program that was done in conjunction with MassRecycle. As I mentioned, we ran municipal recyclers workshops. We did contract management workshops with DEP. We ran an e-waste conference. So that was all really getting people together. Networking has always been a big factor in MassRecycle's success, bringing in stakeholders from all different walks of life. During the aughts, I think it was more heavily municipal focused, as the municipalities were learning how to run their recycling programs better. So we had a big role to play in helping the municipal recycling coordinators know how to do their jobs most efficiently. Another thing that when I was involved that I was most interested in was policy, because if you don't have good policies, it's really hard to put the Band-Aids on to keep things fixed. We need some more big picture efforts. And one of the things that we promoted was the Clean Environment Fund, which unfortunately was a battle that we lost. The Clean Environment Fund was funded by unclaimed bottle deposits, and it was very well funded, and it was supposed to be used to fund recycling programs, municipal and business, and also DEP's, you might remember the MRIP program, which has evolved into RDP. So that provided some very good funding. They never dispersed all the money, but they would disperse several million a year from that. Well, then when the state ran into financial trouble, Governor Romney pulled all the dedicated funds that he could into the general fund, and we lost that funding source. So we worked, MassRecycle worked very hard to try to get that resuscitated. Unfortunately, that was not a battle that we won, but it did end up getting, finding another funding source for those programs, which is through the energy credits that the waste to energies get from making their electricity. The other thing we focused on during my tenure was product stewardship and the updated bottle bill, which there was not consensus on our board about. There was concern about by the MRFs that they would lose some of their valuable commodities, and that never actually happened anyway. But MassRecycle was definitely a voice in that effort. Let me see. So I participated. There's me with my red hair. That's a long time since that was a thing. That's Mark Pacheco on the right-hand side, Senator Mark Pacheco, who was a real champion, and also representative at the time, now Senator Jason Lewis. And we held a forum in Boston about legislative issues that impacted recycling. So we were very active and still are to some extent on that front. MassRecycle always had a presence on the DEP's Solid Waste Advisory Committee, which I'm not sure if they still are, but I'm sure that there are members of the board who are on the SWAC, and that's an important place to also get together with other people from the industry and from the nonprofits and the regulators. MassRecycle also ran and still runs to some extent the municipal recycling councils. It's more a thing with DEP now. It kind of runs it, but back in the day, the MassRecycle was the main driver of those councils, and we had a West Council, a Northeast, Southeast. I'm not sure if there was a Central, but those councils met to discuss topics of interest, particularly to municipal recycling program directors. Some of the other fun things we did was tours. There was a tour of the Nantucket landfill, which they turned into pretty much a zero waste facility with in-vessel composting and source separation. They even collect trash in clear bags because the island, they don't want to have to export any trash or fill up their landfill, which is now closed. So the residents have to bring clear bags, and if anyone at the facility sees a recyclable item in the trash bag, they get sent home and have to sort it out. So that was a real eye opener. That was and I'm disappointed it didn't catch on. We ran tours of the MRFs, and as I was going through my archives, I realized a lot of the tours we went on, the companies are no longer in business, which is kind of a shame. But that's the nature of the business, unfortunately. That you really got to know what you're doing and understand the markets to be successful. So that speaks volumes to our current service providers like Harvey's. And Another fun thing we did, which I'm going to bring up a picture on, is the Lowell Folk Festival. I'm surprised Pat didn't mention that, but MassRecycle helped, and Pat was actually the leader in doing a zero waste program at the multi-day Lowell Folk Festival. This thing goes on for, I can't remember if it's a whole weekend. Pat can probably tell us. But he had it set up that the vendors could only use compostable and recyclable serviceware, no straws allowed. It was a beautiful operation. He had I forget which company would take all the compost, and he had a whole cadre of volunteers, including many of us from the MassRecycle board. My successor Angie helped out. In fact, I think that's where I met her. She was terrific too. So, and that's Bill Stanwood, to the on the right of your screen, who we miss dearly. I'm sorry he couldn't join us today, but yes, you've heard his name. He's been a real mover and shaker in this area. So, see, how much time do I have left? My timer didn't work. What aspects of my time with the organization make me the proudest? That was a broad question. I think the biggest thing we did while I was on the board was the MassRecycle's paper program, which ran from 2006 to 2009. And I'm looking for, here we go. This is our website from the early days of our MassRecycle's paper campaign. DEP was a very huge partner in this. Brooke was on the board. There were several of you on the board, I think, running this thing, and it was a real project. We had hired staff that ran it. We raised over $100,000 over the course of the campaign. We were on television. We had a short ad that aired on the March Madness things, which I couldn't find in my files. I'm really sorry that I lost those. We had a big piece on What's in Store on WBZ, which was taped at the Casella facility in Charlestown. And we had a lot of graphics. Let me see. Here's one of our later graphics. We changed our logo to reflect more the MassRecycle logo. And we were in movie theaters. It was a multimedia campaign, and it was really exciting. When we were ready to really take off, though, we scheduled a fundraising breakfast in November of 2008. And I don't know how many of you remember that time, but it was pretty much the day after the stock market crashed. And it was the beginning of another, recession. So we continued to try to keep that project alive, but it didn't work. So we ended up folding up around in 2010. But I'd like to think that we reached a lot of people on this. The point of it at that time was it's not just for newspapers anymore. And of course, now we're trying to wind that back a little bit. Yeah, it's not for news, it's for more than newspapers, but we don't want, X, Y, and Z. So things are coming around full circle here. My last question was, how do I think MassRecycle can best advance recycling today? As you all know, I'm big on policy, but I think the biggest challenge we have is to connect the dots between climate change and consumption, because we need to get consumption and recycling up in the same consideration as, driving cars and heating our homes. 29% of our greenhouse gas emissions globally come from our consumer products. But since most of them are manufactured elsewhere and transported elsewhere, those numbers don't show up in state greenhouse gas figures or even national ones. Food waste adds another 13% of that. So climate change and consumption are very tightly aligned. And in order to, because of that, we really need to create a circular economy, which is something I've been, concerned about for many, many years, including my time at MassRecycle. So How I think MassRecycle can best advance our recycling today is to engage the producers of all these materials that we're having to recycle, and bring them, it's been happening very slowly, but it is happening, bring them into the equation with the recyclers, with the residents and all the generators, because there historically has been a disconnect between what they produce and what we have to manage at the back end. The extended producer responsibility laws are helping, or bills rather, we don't have very many of them in the United States, but the bills are helping to drive some of these initiatives. It's happening already, it's been happening for decades in Europe and Canada, and it just, when the producers have to consider what happens to their products when they're finished with, especially if they're only single use or disposable, then they really should be taking some responsibility for making sure their things don't just end up being trashed. So I see this, I have 5 bullet points, and then I'm going to wrap up. We need to align products and packaging with our recycling system. We need the producers to contribute to building the infrastructure to handle their products. Since they're the ones that are creating the cost, then it only makes sense that they contribute to the solution. Create a stable demand for their recycled discard by mandating recycled content, using or incentivizing the use of recycled content. We don't need to require it, but use their public relations expertise to educate consumers on how and why to properly recycle. We don't have the resources or the expertise to really truly engage the public to the extent that it needs to happen. It needs to come from the producers, and it needs a big budget and professional expertise. And I think we need them to join the MassRecycle Coalition. They would be a natural new party to engage, I think. So that's my prescription for how we can best advance recycling today. And also I'd like to put in a plug for the Mass Product Stewardship Council, which has been around for several years, and the MassRecycle has adopted it. And they're working on paper and packaging, as well as mattresses and paint, producer responsibility or product stewardship policies and laws. So I encourage everybody, especially municipal folks, because it's mostly municipal, but others as well, to join the Mass Product Stewardship Council, which is going to be meeting again next month. So thank you very much for this great opportunity to talk to everybody, and I hope everybody's had a good time and that we keep MassRecycle strong. I'm so proud that I was a past president of this great organization. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Claire. Your backgrounds are priceless. It's wonderful to see those paper recycling campaign images, which are coming right back to me as I see all those Post-it notes and catalogs and magazines. Of course, now we don't have nearly as many of those things. So a very good example of how recycling is a constant state of change. When I first started in recycling, newspaper was the thing. I remember at Harvard Law School, every Harvard Law School student, faculty, every office got the New York Times, Boston Globe, maybe the Cambridge Chronicle, and 3 or 4 journals, magazines. And I know that because we did waste audits twice a year. We've done over 100 waste audits at Harvard. And now you have to look through many bags before you will find a single newspaper. Students, absolutely none, So it's really, the waste stream has changed. Of course, now we have a lot more corrugated from the Amazon phenomenon, a lot more takeout So the forum is ours. One question I have that is kind of a blessing and a curse for any coalition like MassRecycle or the NRC. In order for us to be the main forum for recycling conversations, Pat, Ben, Claire, you've all pointed out, we have to have industry, we have to have municipalities, we have to have the policy, the state, we have to have environmentalists. They're very divergent interests. And what happened with the last bottle bill expansion effort is a good illustration of that. We couldn't come to an agreement on our board back in 2014. How can a coalition remain the central forum for all things recycling in the state without diluting the message so much that it doesn't have a good effect? Anyone want to take that on?
Yeah, Rob.
Well, I was hoping you weren't asking me that, because that is a challenge. I'm gonna leave it to Phil here.
Well, Ben has a question too.
Yeah, it's always been a very difficult thing, Rob, just as you said, because of all the different, as a business in the recycling arena, it's very difficult to come up with a policy that may impact my business and what we're trying to do on our end. But on the other side of it, Claire and I have talked a lot about this through our years of working together. There has to be some way to get a message out. And does the message, I mean, I know that Claire and some of the people on MassRecycle would like to have it more of a policy. Sometimes it's just an advisement. It's maybe steering people in the right direction. But man, did we have these discussions all throughout the history of MassRecycle.
Absolutely right, Ben. And I think the strength of MassRecycle is the fact that you have people that pick stuff up and put it down who are on the board and have been part of the discussion. What can happen a lot of times is that you get folks that are on the messaging side with the consumers in the residential area and get everybody excited, but they really don't have experience with where it goes from there. The efficiencies, the cost, the capital, the business risks that you, for example, have put up with tens of millions of dollars of your own business capital to build facilities. And the end, at the disposal side as well as the recycling end down here at a landfill, there's the rest of the story that kind of doesn't get heard from, but obviously is affected by all of that and need to be part of the conversation. The bottle bill is a great example. I think, unfortunately, you got a lot of criticism when the bottle bill came out that you were not necessarily for water bottles, and I saw some very uncharitable posts towards MRFs and yourself about that. And the reality is that was 50% of your revenue to keep you paying the bills, to take all the other stuff. So we need to come up with a hybrid in Massachusetts, at least, that supports your infrastructure while doing a bottle bill for water. If you take the water bottles away, give them to one vendor who does the reverse vending machines, how do we keep you viable to do the rest of the stuff? So that level of granularity is where this needs to go. For so long, it's been, well, either you're in for the bottle bill or you're out and you're the bad guys and all that sort of. We don't have time for that anymore. We really don't. We need to close down all disposal facilities. Well, that's just, it's not going to work. Zero tolerance in waste management. I could fail every load every single day if that was the truth. I mean, we can't have those kind of extreme bookends. So I think MassRecycle plays that role really well, and will continue to we need to have that kind of granularity on policy. So it's good, thoughtful policy that's going to work. I give kudos to Robin. I think he's still on there. When you rolled out the CRT ban, you and DEP had a real plan for what to do with the cathode ray tubes. You worked it backwards, inside out, first, rather than have the big band and then go, now what are we going to do? And that's the way it needs to be done going forward. Product stewardship's happening, and we've commented when I was on the board in PSC that, you know, mattress can't be zero tolerance for obvious reasons. So, you know, I saw a mattress get stuffed in a packer, you know, and what am I supposed to do with that when it shows up at the landfill? So these are the real world things that I think the next generation evolution that keeps MassRecycle relevant is a unique mixture of people on this call right now, the activists, the people at the municipal level with real budgets that have to go to their town councils and city councils and say, I need you to double my recycling budget. And when the laughter dies down and they say, which fire personnel do you want us to lay off to do that, or recycling, you know, those are the real questions. So I think that's what's the strength of this organization, and hopefully we can rally around some very specific examples, like the mattress bill would be one, or the bottle bill, to the next level that involves all the stakeholders. Because, you know, otherwise, why would Ben Harvey want to spend another $30 million in a MRF? You know, he'll just retire and cash out. I mean, why would you want to go through that again, right? It's hard. It's hard, and municipalities aren't going to build the facilities. So we need you, and we need these folks. That's my soapbox speech, but it's a practical thing, and that's where it has to go, right?
Great, awesome, Phil. I notice Bill Stanwood's name has come up a lot here. Someone said he's in Florida. Did he really wear a lobster suit at the NRC, Pat? You're on mute, can't hear you.
Yeah, we took turn wearing that suit. There's actually a picture in one of the newsletters of the crowd of us that were there, you know, promoting because the year before our Congress, we were at the NRC promoting Boston, of course. And one time there was a session going on at Jan, and we went into the session, and I was wearing the lobster suit at the time, and the people who were running, they didn't like the fact that the lobster was in there at that time. They ushered us all out, but it was noticed. Everybody saw it, so that's all we needed, you know. And yeah, Bill is he's down in Florida. He still has his home in Ashby, and I spoke to him, oh well, a couple of weeks ago, and so he's you know, he's doing fine, and enjoying the warm weather, you know, and there was a great picture of him at the Lowell Folk Festival. He was my sidekick at the Lowell Folk Festival, and kept me out of trouble a few times. So, but he was, but he was a great, what a great guy, and so committed, and he was there in the very beginning as well. And I should have reached out to him and had him on this. The other thing I want to say is about Alan Silverstein. And Alan was just such a wonderful person, and he and I co-chaired the committee for the Congress. So he did a lot of work in that, and so he's sorely missed. He was a wonderful guy, great friend, and
Another person, I tried to reach him, but the email bounced back to me. Don Marshall from Bedford.
Oh yeah, Don. You know, Don was I used to talk about Don all the time because he was one of these people who used to do paper drives. You know, when I was with North Shore, we used to do paper drives, and he lived in Bedford, and he was one of these people that were into it all the time. You know, when they started glass recycling, I mean, he was in the bin sorting out bottles of, you know, I mean, he was really just a grass. That's the way it used to be, right, Ben? It was paper drives, you know, up and down. And Don started way back then, and he was either the second or third president, or maybe he and Bill were co-presidents. I forget how that went, but yeah, Don Marshall was an inspiration to all. You know,
he was one of the better ones, Pat. You're right, 100%. He just he was just he was a wonderful person, just a wonderful person, and that his heart was in recycling. I used to, every time he would come to the office for a board of directors meeting, he said, "Oh boy, free coffee." He was so excited to get a cup of coffee. And I don't know the years that he was the president, but I remember we went up to his house one time for a
Yeah.
meeting. And
He had the dogs. Remember he raised those dogs?
yeah, yeah. And I haven't heard from Don in a long time. Every once in a while, I would get an email from his wife. You know, he used to like those planners, Pat, that I used to send out.
Okay. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, we
Me
stopped
too.
doing that, but every year she would say, "Can I have a couple of those planners?" She would send me an email. So
Yeah. I still use those planners, except your name isn't on them. I got so used to them. I get them at, I get them at Staples now. You know.
Another name I haven't heard of in a while is Pat Burdan from Wellesley.
Well, Pat passed away.
Oh, he did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Pat was he was the head of the DPW at Wellesley, and at the time, people don't know this, but early on, there were two recycling centers that were world renowned, and people used to come in Meredith, New Hampshire, and Wellesley, and people would come in from Europe. I mean, they were like state of the art, especially Wellesley, to see how the Americans did drop-off centers. I mean, it was just, it was amazing that was the height of the technology at the time. You know, right, Ben? And
yes, yeah, another wonderful person. You know, everybody in this industry, in this our association, fantastic people.
yeah,
Like you said earlier, Pat, we've met some wonderful people, and the memories we have of those people.
energetic, smart,
Yes. Yeah,
you know, committed. Yes.
ahead of their time in the case of Pat.
Yeah. I just want to mention too, Jan, who's on this. I mean, there's other people who've going to been on this panel for sure. Robin for sure. Susan Tellis and Mark Fournier came on. I guess he's still on. Kathy Mirza. I mean, you know, so many people have been around for a long time. Working on all this stuff. So kudos to everybody who's part of this thing.
Yes.
Before we sign off, Robin has asked me for permission to give Ben an apology, and I'm not sure why. So, Robin, do you want to proceed?
Well, yeah, it actually came up a bit because when I was at Mass DP, one of the things that we really liked about MassRecycle was that even if there was nothing to do, you know, we didn't really like the pressure to do something. But you never knew when some urgency was going to come around, or that you were going to need some group. And as Phil said, you want people who are touching stuff. And Massachusetts, we thought, largely thanks to MassRecycle, had a lot of crossover between municipalities, commercial businesses, commercial recyclers, residential recyclers, and it really created a network where nobody was really abusing their position, though they could. But what I think several times a year, my favorite thing I ever did at Massachusetts DEP is also something that I wince at because of this one mistake I made. You know, Ben, some of you remember, you know, I came in at 29 years old to lead this recycling division at Mass DEP, this reverse carpetbagger from Arkansas that literally was riding the freight elevators to collect their waste paper at DEP, which is how they got to know me. But one of the things that I inherited was Mass DEP had this plan for the Clean Environment Fund to build 6 Springfield MRFs across the Commonwealth, funded by the Clean Environment Fund. And the first thing I did was say, do you not realize that you have in this state the North Shore Fibers and the E.L. Harveys and the P&T Containers and the Murray Foxes that, you know, so I coming in from having, you know, driven the recycling truck,
found this master plan that was written by a UMass major in Marxist economics. Literally, John Shaw.
Yeah, John Shaw.
And their plan was to put all of you guys out of business. So what I did was manage to, as this 29-year-old punk, go and use my business card to get invited to go in and meet the Milty Schaefers and the Baynard Pauls, and these people who were telling me stories about having created their recycling business. You know, Baynard Paul from up in the Northeast, you know, is telling me about how Shelley Appel's dad, you know, got him into the business in the night during the Great Depression. And yeah, I was this Jewish guy, but all the newspaper collections were run by the archdiocese. And Appel tells me, just go in there, just tell them you want the paper. And they gave me the Merrimack Valley. And that's, you know, and he would tell me, anyway, one of the best things I ever did, and also my apology to Ben, is I got together, I think it was at Dan Moon's Waste Expo conference. I said, it'd be really cool to have some of these legends, you know, some of these great names that people don't know about. And got, you know, Johnny Gold, Baynard Paul. The one that I'm embarrassed by was Rob Vincent, because he was a young guy in his 30s. But he was the guy that was teaching me. You know, he got me into the Monteleones and all the New York City. So when I put this thing together, I'm like, Rob doesn't really qualify as a family stalwart business, but I owe it. You know, let me put him on there. Shelley Appel, he was the third.
Yep.
And who's sitting here in this presentation? Ben Harvey.
Front row.
Having to not only not have his place on that esteemed panel, but having to look at Rob Vincent, this 30-year-old, replacing him. And Ben just sat there very quietly and watched these guys. I know that, Ben, I know that you enjoyed hearing from Shelley Appel and you enjoyed hearing Baynard Paul and Johnny Gold even. I think you enjoyed that. But I apologize for that. And I also want to say MassRecycle's biggest mistake, you know, you guys have kind of glossed over. But in 1996, there was a shameful thing which Pat Scanlon had something to do with.
and glad to do it, Robin.
Anyway, thanks guys for putting this together. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, it's great to
see
have
you, Robin.
Great to have you. And you know, we've just tapped the keg. I'm sure the stories could flow for a long, long time. I know.
Hey, Rob, before you go away, hey Rob, before you go away, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just got to say hi to all my old friends. It's so wonderful to see you guys. I was like, wow, I got that email yesterday. I was like, oh man, I was late because I had another meeting. I said, hey, I was with the local newspapers. I got to go. I got a Zoom. I got to go to. So it's so wonderful to see you guys. We had such good times, and you know, I look at this screen and it's like, it was the best years of my life. I got to tell you, it really was. So just sorry to interrupt, Rob. Just wanted to say hi to you guys.
Well, so glad you did, Mark. And now it's time for closing words from Gretchen, our esteemed president of 2021.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you. Oh, sorry, of course, thank you, Rob, and thank you to Pat and Ben and Claire. This has just been such a great afternoon of MassRecycle history. I will admit that even I did not know the part that MassRecycle played in our state's history until somebody came up with the idea of putting this together. And as we started talking about joining the NRC, I found out that we used to be a member and how big a part that membership played in the early days. So I happen to have 12 boxes of MassRecycle paperwork and memorabilia in my garage. Thank you, Claire, for that offer of more, but you know, we can talk about that later. That's been passed down through time, and it told me some of the history, but this was much more fun to hear it this way. I have to say that one of the most challenging things about being president of MassRecycle is finding out that every good idea has already been had 10, 15, or 20 years ago. Oh, sure, we used to have so many schools and colleges as members. That's not a new idea. Yeah. The other humbling fact is that every third person in the audience at every event was a board member, a founding father, or a past president. The dedication to this field and specifically to this organization is just amazing. I would like to take a moment to ask anyone who has served on this board before to please raise their hand virtually or visually. I just want everybody to just go over to that little gallery. Oh my gosh, see? Okay, yep. And yeah, just put your hand. Thank you. I want to thank you all because I am so honored to see so many of you return year after year to our conferences and social events. And I thank you. I thank you for everything you have done for our field and for this organization. And I hope that you feel that we are doing a good job with the legacy that you have passed down. Personally, the current board is the best that I have had the pleasure of working with, and I am surrounded by passionate professional people from so many different facets of the waste industry, all of whom are dedicated to educating and engaging with our membership and the public to move us forward. You, the past presidents, did that job very well and established those systems across the states. And in one very big way, MassRecycle has changed with the times. Recycling is only one of the goals now. And the DEP has put waste bans into place so that even in tough times, we don't backslide. But now we look at waste so very differently that we've moved through the 3 R's to the 9 or 12 or however you want to put it, to become sustainable materials management. And how can we avoid making more waste? How can we help design waste to be more compostable, recyclable, reusable? There's always been so many smart people in this field who've spent so much time thinking outside the box to improve the system. And over the last decade, MassRecycle and I have had the honor of granting the Lifetime Commitment Award to many of you. And yes, I'm doing it again. I know that even as I talk about sustainable materials management, and I'm calling it a new way of thinking, anyone who lived through World War II would laugh at me for calling it a new way of thinking. We all need reminding that we're not inventing the wheel, but instead that there's been a steady path of progress with continuous obstacles and occasional victories. And it honestly is heartening to find that we have, you know, found ourselves in tough times before and found our way out of it. So thanks for letting me know that I'm not the first one to find myself there. It has never been easy, but it's always been worth doing. So for those of you who started MassRecycle and kept it rolling, we thank you for your hard work and for your foresight. We plan to continue making steady progress, rediscovering the smart ideas you already had, and I hope to never stop meeting past board members and past presidents at MassRecycle conferences. I hope to see you all at our virtual conference in April 15th and 16th, coming up quickly. Thank you so much and have an excellent afternoon.
Thanks, Pat, Ben, Claire, Gretchen. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Hope to see you in April.
Take care, everyone.